Welcome everyone to the August Focus Series. Today we're focusing on enabling conversations on exploring options. Now, when we think of exploring options in Asset Map, there's two key features that really help enable these conversations. And the first one is target map scenarios or comparisons, and the second one is drafts. Now, both of these are more than just a feature. They're really a bridge between helping a client understand the current reality and the bridge to what is possible. What are the future possibilities that the client has? So when we think about target map scenarios and drafts, it's what is that bridge we want to create and what do we want to show the client? These features are great in that they bring the client into the conversation. They help show them visually and simply and easily what those different options look like that they have available to them and how it impacts their ability to meet their goals. So we can really paint that picture of this is where you are now, but this is what that future could look like. And these are the bridges that we can use to illustrate that. But the question I often get is, well, which bridge do I use? Do I use target map scenarios to enable this conversation, or do I use drafts, or do I use both? And if I do use both, in what order do I use them to illustrate that to clients? And that's really what we're going to focus on today. So the first one with target map scenarios, that's where you want to open up a conversation around understanding options with the client. And those options in terms of their ability to meet their goals or the needs that they have. So that's the one that we use to show impact. For example, you're currently 60% funded, but if we do X, Y, and Z, then that moves to 80% or it moves to 50%. So it's where we want to show the client the impact of different options on their ability to meet their goals. When we want to understand structure, so when we want to facilitate conversations around structure changes, and we want to make that really tangible for our clients so that they can see exactly what that means, that's when we can use drafts to be the bridge between the current and the future possibilities. So that's, for example, where we want to show a client, if you do X, Y, and Z, this is your current picture, and this is the changes that you'll see on your picture from a structural point of view. So let's make it a little bit more tangible and just talk through some scenarios of when you would use target maps or when you would use drafts. So the first one in target maps is where you want to show current and proposed scenarios. Your current ability to meet your goal versus if we do X, Y, and Z, if we do these proposed changes, look at the impact that has on your ability to meet your goal. Then we're going to use target map scenarios where we want to explore options with the client. So those are things like if I save more, if I spend less, if I work longer, if I target a higher return, what is the impact of that on my ability to meet my goal? There we're going to use target maps. But it's not only conversations within a particular goal. Also use target map scenarios and comparisons to look across different goals or needs to open up that trade-off conversation. And what I mean by that is if, for example, a client needs to perhaps save more for retirement, but they also have gaps in the event of a loss of life or disability. And we want to open up and enable a conversation around, should we be saving more for retirement or putting some of that into protection, or vice versa? Maybe the client's later in life, more closer to retirement, they can start reducing on the loss of life or disability side and routing that more into savings. So it's a great way of enabling a conversation around those different trade-offs and priorities around what the client's best next move is. So those are some examples with target map scenarios. On the draft side, there I'm going to use the drafts bridge when I want to show a client current versus proposed from an implementation point of view. So this is your current picture, but if we implement these things that we are discussing, look how it changes your picture. It's also a great way of opening up a conversation around consolidation. And that's if a client has multiple investments or multiple risk products, and we really want to talk about how we consolidate that, target the return the client requires, or consolidate the risk benefits to help the client move forward. Using drafts to show the client really tangibly, this is what that will look like. This is what will fall away. This is what will add. It's also great for showing before and after life events. So this is one we get asked a lot. I want to show a client when there is a life event, there's usually lots of changes happening in one go. And you want to be able to really illustrate that for the clients in a way that they can visually see, okay, what does that look like? What does it mean for me and my picture when I retire? What falls away? What are we adding? Where am I getting the income? Where am I taking my income from? You can use drafts to really show those before and after pictures, whether that life event is getting married, whether that life event is having a child or retirement. It's a great way of showing before and after. Often I get asked, how do I duplicate an asset map? Because we want to show that before and after. Drafts is a great way of doing that without having to create multiple households for a client, being able to show that before and after. And then, of course, any sort of structural changes. We need to move something into the trust, for example, from the company, or we want to move something between spouses. Any sort of structural changes, drafts is a great way of illustrating that and making it tangible. And then, of course, there's examples where we use both. And I'm going to take you through an example of that now. But the key thing is thinking about which bridge can I use today for the conversation I'm trying to enable? Which one is going to help me really illustrate to the client the options they have in a way that brings them into the conversation, that they feel informed and they can make those decisions that help move them forward. So let's jump in to an example. All right. Perfect. All right, so here we have the Fraser household, Christina and John. They're still relatively young, they're in their 30s, and we can, just having a look at their picture and where they are today, can see that they're both earning an income. So we've got Christina earning a salary, John earning a salary here, and Christina's got quite a couple of retirement funds. So we've got 3 different ones here, 3 different providers, targeting different returns, but overall around about 8%. She's also got some funds in money markets. On John's side, he's got pension fund via his employer, as well as a unit trust investment, and they've got property and loans. If we look right at the top, while they do have some life cover, they are a bit low on the risk benefit side. We can immediately see there's some gaps there. So in our conversation with Christina and John, the things that we want to look at is, how on track are they for retirement? So we've been very clear around what they want to achieve in retirement, but we also want to look on that protection side. How equipped are they to meet their goals in the event of death or disability? So the first thing I'm going to do is then run the target match scenarios. Now, you'll see I've run quite a couple of scenarios here, and this is something you'd rather do with the client, but I'm just going to talk through that in a minute. But we started off with just their current retirement target map. So they want to retire at 65, and talk through what their needs are. They're currently targeting about 8% return across those different investments. So I've gone ahead and put that as their current scenario. I'm going to come back to these other scenarios in just a minute, but I just want to show you at the bottom here, we've also looked on that death and disability side. So in the event of loss of life for either Christina or John, what are their needs and how can they currently meet that, as well as on the disability side. And we can immediately see, looking at there's some shortfalls which we expected in loss of life as well as disability. Definitely need to do some income protection to cover that, and perhaps bolster that risk benefits on the loss of life side to be 100% funded for the needs that they have. So let's assume we've had that conversation with them. Those are the things that we want to do, and now we want to explore options on the retirement side. And this is really where you want to bring the client into the conversation. So instead of, you can create the scenarios up front, but it's really great to just start working through the scenario with the client and building those changes together with them. So starting by, what are the client's needs in the event of retirement? And here we've put in what sort of income they want, what sort of travel allowance they want, what sort of medical they want to be able to cover. And of course, under the What You Have section, we've brought in all of their retirement funds as well as what they're contributing towards that retirement fund. But we can see they're 62% funded. So while they are quite funded, they're not quite where they want to be. And now we can start to work through options with them. And this is where you want to invite the clients to, work through those options and prompt for them to prompt what those options are. So for example, what if I saved more? What if I spent less? What if I worked longer? What if I targeted a higher return? This can be a really powerful, as Betty mentioned, that financial planning experience for when a client is able to take ownership of that and they're prompting you with the changes and you're working through it together. So in this example, let's say the conversation with the client, they were pretty set on what sort of income they wanted and what they're currently contributing. They'd rather, instead of saving more, reroute that on the death and disability side, because we know that's where there's quite a bit of a gap. So the first thing we explored is, well, what if we work longer? Instead of retiring at 65, what if we push that out to age 70 and target a little bit of a higher return? And we can see immediately there it jumps from 62 to over 100% funded. So that sort of solves for that without having to save more or spend less. But then let's say in conversation with the client, they said, no, we're quite set on that retiring at 65, instead of working to 70. So then we looked at an option of, okay, if we keep it at 65, what sort of return do we need to target in order to still achieve the goals that the client has? Now, this is very personal to each client and dependent on, what's important to them. But I'm just for illustrative purposes here showing you how you can create these different scenarios to open up those different conversations. Obviously, with this client, there's a risk conversation around that targeting 10% and how we go about doing that. But you can see how by creating these scenarios, I can work through that with the client. They're part of the conversation, and I can immediately show them the impact of different decisions on their ability to meet their goals. I can also, by selecting these checkboxes here, bring it up as a comparison. So I can select up to 3 and then just select this green button at the bottom to compare. Again, just bringing it onto one screen, keeping the visual very clean and clear for the clients so that they can really understand what these different options are. We can see the retirement ages here at the bottom. We can see the different returns and what the impact of that is. I can also rename the scenarios straight from here by just double clicking on any of the wording, okay? Or open it up like you see there. So using comparisons again to just drive that conversation around what are the options and how are we going to meet this client's goal. But let's say through this conversation, we decided this is the one we're going for. We're going to target inflation or inflation plus 4 in this case, or a 10% return across the investments, and try and keep that retirement age at 65. So I can go ahead and click this is our target and select it here as the targeted scenario that we're going to try to achieve. But I can also use target map comparisons across the different goals. So now that we know this is the one that we're targeting, I can select that one and then perhaps select loss of life and disability to open up a conversation around, now that we've agreed not to potentially save more into retirement, can we route some of that into filling this gap in the event of loss of life, and then also adding income protection on the disability side. So you can see how you can use it for that trade-off priority conversation, as well as looking at a particular goal. All right, so let's say now for this client, we've made those decisions. We're going to target this retirement scenario. So we need to talk about how we target that 10% return, and we're going to fill in the gaps for loss of life and disability. This is where I can really bring drafts in to make that tangible and real for the clients. So if I go back here to Asset Map, I'm going to open up the draft and I will show you how you recreate them, but I've created 2 for this client already. So I select drafts, and I want to first talk about the consolidation of the retirement annuity funds. So I select that one and I apply. Now you can immediately see we're in the draft mode. We've got the watermark at the back showing that we're in draft mode. And here I can show that we're going to take these 3 retirement funds and we're going to consolidate them into one, where we target that 10% return. So you can just see how using drafts, I can make it really real and close off that conversation really nicely, or that experience really nicely. You say, this is what we're agreeing, get the commitment from the client, this is how we're moving forward. I'm going to also flip to the next draft, which is showing the proposed implementation. So in addition to that step, we've also agreed to implement additional life cover and income protection to fill those gaps on death and disability. All right, so you can see how by using the target map scenarios and comparisons, I can facilitate and enable a conversation around options and the client's ability to meet their goals. And then using drafts, I can just close out that conversation, make it real. This is what we're implementing. This is how it's going to impact your picture, and take that step forward with the clients. Right. Then the next question we often get is, okay, but now that I've done that, when do I accept that draft, or when does it become the client's new current reality? And that typically would be when the client implements it. So let's assume now we've gone that next step ahead. The client's implemented the life cover and the income protection. I can go ahead and open it up, and it'll say commit the change. The second I commit the change, it's no longer a draft. It's going to now change the client's current picture and accept that implementation. So I can go ahead and commit that change. Okay. Then I can close the draft. I'm just going to do the life cover for now, but the idea is you would commit everything the client implemented, not commit what hasn't been implemented. And then when I close the draft, we can see that is now part of the client's current picture because I've accepted it. Right. And we can then see the impact, and it has updated the two loss of life scenarios. Right. So you can see how you can use both together. Another way of using drafts, not only in showing implementation or, changes like that, is if we want to show life events for a client. So in this client's case, we've got a client that is just about to retire. If we have a look at Jack, we can see he's earning a salary that's going to fall away now, but he's got a retirement fund. He's also got a trust investment, some property. He's got some group benefits through his employer, as well as some personal cover that will obviously remain. The first thing I want to do is think about his ability to draw the income that he needs. Is it sustainable based on the investments he has? And that's where I'm going to create a target map. In this case for Jack, he sets us the income that he wants is $32,000 per month, so $384 per annum. And now I can go ahead and check with the investments that Jack has, can he sustain that? Can he meet that income need? So we can use this unit trust as well, and we can see, okay, that gets him just about 100% funded. So now we've answered the question on Jack's ability to meet the need in terms of income. But the next question I want to answer for Jack is to show, what is that going to look like, this change of moving from being employed to being retired? How is that going to change Jack's picture? And again, drafts is a great way of showing this before and after. I've created a retirement draft. I then apply it, and now I can talk through what changes Jack's going to experience, and what does that look like. So the first one I can say is, this pension fund is going to fall away. We're going to take $6.5 million of that and put that in the living annuity. The other 500,000 is going to go over here for some emergency savings. Then from a risk point of view, yes, your group life and employee benefits, they're going to fall away, but your personal life cover remains intact. And from an income point of view, the salary is going to fall away, but we're going to draw some from your trust investments and the difference from your living annuity here. So you can see how you can use drafts, just sort of make it real for the client. What does that mean? And help them make that transition. You can also generate drafts as a report by just clicking on this PDF button in the top right corner. And just to show you what that will look like, that'll give you a page like this, where you can see it's a draft, it's got the watermark with the draft name, and it shows all of the changes. They're also notated with an X if you're removing something, a plus if you're adding, and a little pencil if you're editing. And I'll take you through how to create the draft now. So let me close that up here. So if you wanted to create drafts for your clients, how you go about doing that is you can right click on the page, or you can always click on this plus here and select drafts at the bottom. You select to create a new draft. I'm just going to call it test draft for now, and you select create. Now you're in the draft mode. You can see the watermark at the back, and you can see this bar at the bottom. Any changes we make now to this picture will not change the client's current asset map, but only change it in this particular draft. And we've added a bit more functionality here. So you can see you can add legal documents as part of a draft now. You can add members, additional members for the household. You can add entities as part of your draft. And you can also add cash flows, assets, liabilities, or insurance. So if I wanted to add a unit trust, for example, we just add it like this. Just want to show you how that shows up on the map that I created. And there you see it's in pink and it's got a little plus to say I've added it. If I want to edit something, I can open it up. I can make any changes. Transfer and updates. I can change just the wording or the amount, and that'll be notated with this little pencil here. Or I can delete something, and I just trash can it here, say yes, and that'll show up on the draft with the little X over here. I can then also hide the changes and show them so you can reflect it for our clients. And I can easily flip between different drafts that I've created for our clients. Okay, showing different options and then deciding on the one that they want to achieve. Okay, perfect. Let me close off Benny. Right, so just in closing, to reiterate again that it's more than just a feature. These are bridges that help create that financial planning experience that Benny referred to in the beginning, where we can really tangibly show a client, this is your current picture, these are the options you have available. Let's work through it together, decide what is the right one for you, and then use drafts to make it really tangible for a client that they can visually see this is the impact for them. Thank you so much for joining today, and please let us know if you want to work through it together, or how you're using drafts and scenarios in different ways. Please let us know. Thank you.